Hello and welcome to Maki's Closet. On today's tutorial, I'll be sharing with you a requested video of how to draft and sew an underbust corset gown. So if it's your first time viewing my channel, please hit on the subscribe button. If you're a returning subscriber, thank you for supporting my channel. So let's start. So the first thing I'm going to do is to go ahead to mark my measurement. I'm going to place my tape, mark my shoulder to bust line, and mark my shoulder to underbust, which is 12 inches. And after that, I'll be adding 2.5 inches to my underbust measurement. So my underbust measurement is, of which is my shoulder to underbust measurement is 12 inches. Adding 2.5 inches to it, I'll have 14.5. So I decided not to use my waist measurement at this point because while looking at the back, if I used my waist measurement, my back will be too open, so I want it to be a bit higher at the back. So next, I'm going to go ahead and place my ruler and I will draw out all the lines. So after I'm done drawing, I'll just go ahead and label it as my shoulder to bust point, my shoulder to under bust point, and I'll mark here as my half length. Now the next step I'll be taking is to mark my shoulder circumference divided by 2. So my shoulder is 14 inches divided by 2. I have 7 and I'll be adding half to it, making it 7.5 because I'm attaching sleeve. Then come down by 1 inch and I'm going to connect and slant to my shoulder. So I'm just going to go ahead and use my marker to draw it out because my pencil is a bit faint. So from that point, I'm going to get my chest line, which is your bust circumference divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches. So from that point, I'll still measure this 7.5 inches I have at the shoulder to make sure it is a straight line, and I'll go ahead to rule this out. So after I'm done doing that, I'm going to place my ruler and I'm going to connect it to the shoulder this way. So after I'm done connecting it, I'm going to divide this into 2. So to divide this into 2, I'm going to place my tape and fold it this way. Mark at that point. So from this point, I'm going to go in by ½ inch. So after I'm done marking the ½ inch, I'm going to go ahead to place my French curve. But before I do that, I'm going to mark my bust circumference divided by 4, which is 33 divided by 4. I'll go ahead to mark. So next, I'm going to place my French curve, touching that my bust circumference point down to the middle line, and I will take it up to my shoulder. So after I'm done doing that, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to connect and outline the line so that it's going to be very visible. So I'll label there as CL, meaning chest line. So right now I'm going to make the mark for the neckline. I'm using 3.5 inches and I'll just go ahead to mark 3 inches. Now I'm just using this as a guide. I won't be touching this for now, so I went ahead to mark it out with my French curve this way. So I'm just going to leave this for now and we're going to work on it. Next, we're going to be marking my dart intake. So to do that, you're going to mark your nipple to nipple. So my nipple to nipple is 7 inches divided by 2. I have 3.5. So I'm just going to mark it at my bust point, at my under bust and my half length, and I'll just go ahead to draw a straight line. So after drawing that, from that point, I'm going to come down by 1 inch from my bust line. So I'll place my tape to mark your dart is your shoulder to bust point plus 1 inch. So at this part, I'm going to go ahead to mark ½ inch at both sides. So marking ½ inch at both sides. So if you're on a plus size, you can just go ahead and use 1 or 1.5 inches. I'm making use of a normal dart intake at this point. So I'm just going to go ahead to connect it up this way and connect it to the other part. So after I'm done connecting, what I'm going to do is to use my marker and I'm going to draw it and make it visible. So when I'm done, I'm going to go ahead and place my tape. I'll find the distance between my bust and my underbust. That is my bust radius. And I'm just going to go ahead to mark it round. So now I'm using this as a guide. So in this underbust corset, I also want to explain another type. So that's why I am marking this bust radius. So I'll just go ahead and continue marking till I get a round circle, and I'm just going to use my marker to outline it. So the distance between my bust and my underbust is 3 inches, and that is what I'm marking round. So after I'm done marking, I'll go ahead to outline the circle, and this is what I have. So now I'll be inserting my body measurement, which is my bust circumference divided by 4, and I'm going to go ahead to mark. So for this pattern, I won't be using much allowance. I'm just going to add ½ inch to it. Why? Because there's nothing at the back of the dress. So the next step is just to go ahead to mark my underbust circumference divided by 4, measure the start intake I have here, and I'm going to go ahead to replace it. After I'm done replacing it, I'm going to add ½ inch to it. So at the half length, I'm going to be inserting my waist circumference. So I'm going to mark my waist circumference divided by 4, and I'll just go down and measure this dart intake I have here. I'm going to replace it, and I'm going to add ½ inch to my pattern also. So I'll go ahead and take what I have at my bust. I'll extend it down to my chest line, and from that point I'm going to mark from my bust line down to my underbust line, and from my underbust line I'm going to connect it down to my waist point. So next, I'm going to go ahead to take my marker, and I'm going to outline the mark that I made from the bust line down to the underbust line and to the waistline. Now from my underbust point, I'm going to come up by 2 inches. So now this is for in case you don't want to review your cleavage, but you can just go ahead and mark 1 inch from your underbust. So I don't want to fill my cleavage that much, so I went ahead to mark 2 inches, and from there I'm going to connect it to my underbust this way. So after connecting it, I'm just going to go ahead to use my marker, and I'm going to outline it out. So now in some underbust corset, you find out from this point you can go ahead and measure like 1 inch, and you connect it to your armhole area and down to your underbust. But looking at this pattern that we have here, we are not making that type. Just like I said, in some underbusts, by the time you mark 1 inch away from your bust, you're going to connect it to your armhole area side and take it down to your waist. But for this pattern, looking at it from the underbust corset is slanted down, so I'm just going to go down by 1 inch because I don't have much bust, but you can go down by 1.5 or 2 inches more if you want to. So what I will do right now is to connect it from that 1 inch I came down from down to my underbust, and I'm going to go ahead to outline it with my marker. So now after I'm done marking, the next step is to work on my neckline. So from that 3.5 inches at the top for our neckline, I'm going to connect it to this point I came up by 2 inches at my underbust. So I'll just go ahead and I will draw it out. After drawing it out, I'm just going to go ahead and blend in the lines. So I'll just go ahead and label the upper part as yoke just to differentiate it from the lower part. Label here as A and label here as B. So you can go ahead to cut out your darts, but I'll blend it out. So now the next step is just to cut out this pattern, and my front pattern is ready. So while cutting out at the upper part, I'll just go right up and I'll continue cutting my pattern. So after I'm done cutting, this is what I have, and we'll be moving over to the back pattern. So on the upper part of this dress, you notice that there's a little folding or ruffle effect at the lower part. So I'm just going to place mark, and I will slash and spread this part just a little. So that's why I just went ahead to just cut out here a little. So I'll be doing that when I'm cutting my pattern. So this is it for the upper part of this dress, and we'll be moving over to the lower part. So now for the lower part, we don't need much pattern. So I just measured from my shoulder to my bust line, which is 9 inches. And the next step I'm going to take right now is to mark my shoulder divided by 2. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll mark my shoulder divided by 2. I'll add ½ inch, also go down by 1 inch, and I'm going to connect it to the upper part of my pattern. Next is to mark my chest line. I'm going to place and mark my bust circumference divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches. I'm going to go ahead and place my ruler, and I'll draw out and place my ruler this way, and I'm going to connect. So after I'm done connecting, I'm going to divide what I have into 2, and I'll mark at this point, go in by ½ inch, and from that point I'm going to go ahead, mark my bust circumference divided by 4, and I'll use it as a guide, place my French curve, connect it from that point to the ½ inch inwards, and I'm going to take it to my shoulder point this way. So after I'm done, the next thing I'm going to mark right now is my neckline. So I'll be using 3.5 inches, just like I used for the front, sorry, and I'll come down by 2 inches at the back, and from that point I'm going to place my French curve, connect from the 3.5 down to the 2 inches this way. So I'll go ahead and place my ruler, and I'll reconnect it back to my shoulder line this way. So after I'm done doing that, I'm going to come down by 1.5 inches at the neckline. So now I'm going to connect it down to this point. So I'm just going to measure about 1 inch round it, and as a guide first, and going down I'll mark ½ inch. So right now I'm just going to measure ½ inch from this point, and I'm going to mark. So I'll just use only ½ inch after my chest line for the back. So I won't be using more than that for the back part, because if you notice at the back, there's nothing really at the back, is just open. Moving over to the upper part, I'm just going to connect it down to the lower part this way. First of all, I'll just make a dot, and I'll use that dot as my guide. So I'll connect it down to the lower part this way, and I'll follow the lines, and I will mark it out going down to the back. So I'll go ahead and write this as yoke, and the back pattern is done. So now I'll just go ahead and cut it out, and we'll be moving over to the lower pattern of this dress. So after I'm done cutting, this is what I have. Moving over to the back pattern, so first of all I folded my material this way, because I just had 2 yards of material for this dress. And so if you notice, one part of the fabric is a bit longer than the other part. So I was supposed to place the lower part of the upper dress on it and cut out. So I decided to make it into a shorter gown and to fold it into a full flay. So I'm folding it into 2 flay, and I'm just going to go ahead to fold it in a triangular form. And what I did was to get the underbust part of this dress. So I forgot to blend out the dart before placing this, but before we start sewing, we are going to go ahead to take out the dart area and reduce the waistline of this dress. So the next step I did was just to go ahead to pin down my pattern. So while placing it, if you notice, this part I placed it at the closed part of this fabric, so I went ahead to pin this down. Now I'm going to go ahead to mark out. So after pinning down, I'm going to get the full length of my dress, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to make sure I measure what I have here, and I'll just take it down a bit, what I have on that waistline where my pattern ended. And from that point right now, I'm going to slant it to the end of my fabric this way. So after I'm done slanting, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my tape and mark the full length of my gown. Sorry, my line is not visible. I'll just go ahead and use a marker to do that. So for the sides, I'm just going to go ahead and use this marker, and I'll outline it, making a dot. So I'll be following that dot. So the next step I'll take right now, I'm going to place my tape. You know that the pattern at the upper part ended at 14.5. I'll place it at 14.5. The full length of the gown I'm working is 40 inches. So I'm just going to place my tape, and I'm going to go ahead and mark it. So I'm going to use my marker to mark. So once I place at the upper part 14.5 inches, I'm going to take it to find where I have 40 inches on the lower part. So placing my tape at 14 inches at the upper part, I'll go ahead and mark 40 inches at the lower part. So I'm just going to go ahead and I will repeat the process till I get a round shape. So sorry, my line is not so visible. I went ahead to use a marker so that it will be more visible. So what I'll do right now is to cut this all out. Because my fabric is a bit slippery, so while cutting is going to move, I went ahead to cut it off the camera. So after I'm done cutting, this is what I have. Now to cut for the back part of this dress, the back part is going to start from that 14 inches. So I'll go ahead and fold it over this way, place it on another fabric, add 1 inch zipper allowance at the side, and on the top part I'll also add 1 inch because I'll be folding the upper part, and at the sides I'll just cut exactly what I have. So after that, I'll just go ahead and iron out my fabric. So with this, we have come to the end of today's tutorial. Please join us in our next video where we'll be sewing this particular pattern, and if you haven't yet subscribed, please hit on the subscribe button. Thanks.